The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the parched earth as Ethan Irwin stood beside the small grave, his weathered hat clutched against his chest. The year was 1875, and in the 3 months since his wife Sarah had died in childbirth, he'd barely managed to keep himself together, let alone care for his newborn son and 4-year-old daughter. His calloused fingers trembled as he placed a wildflower on the mound of dirt that held the only woman he'd ever loved, the cruel Montana Territory having claimed yet another soul too gentle for its harsh realities. "Pa?" A small voice broke through his grief. His daughter, Lily, tugged at his pant leg, her blonde curls dancing in the breeze. "Baby Thomas is crying again." Ethan swallowed hard, placing his hat back on his head. "I hear him, sweetheart. Let's go see what your brother needs." He took his daughter's tiny hand in his, feeling the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. The walk back to their modest ranch house seemed longer than usual, the sound of his infant son's wails growing louder with each step. Inside the cabin, Mrs. Peterson, an elderly neighbor who'd been helping when she could, bounced the red-faced baby awkwardly in her arms. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I've tried everything. He just won't settle." "Thank you for trying, Mrs. Peterson." Ethan took his son carefully, his rough hands seeming too large for the tiny bundle. Thomas continued to cry, his face screwed up in distress. "I know, little one. I miss her too." "Mr. Irwin," Mrs. Peterson said, gathering her shawl around her shoulders. "I hate to say it, but I can't keep coming over like this. My Arthur's rheumatism is getting worse, and he needs me home." Ethan nodded, understanding but panicking inside. "Of course, Mrs. Peterson. You've been more than kind. You need to find someone, Ethan. A proper nurse for the baby, maybe even a wife, eventually. Those children need a mother's touch." After she left, Ethan sat heavily in the rocking chair by the fireplace, trying to soothe his son while Lily played quietly with her rag doll in the corner. The truth of Mrs. Peterson's words weighed on him. He needed help, someone who knew how to care for an infant properly. Not a wife. The mere thought felt like a betrayal, but someone with the skills his children desperately needed. "What do you think, Lily Flower?" he asked, using the nickname Sarah had given their daughter. "Should Pa try to find someone to help us with Thomas?" Lily looked up, her eyes so like her mother's, serious beyond her years. "Yes, Pa. Thomas cries too much. He misses Mama." "We all do, sweetheart." Ethan sighed, making his decision. Tomorrow he would ride into town and speak with Doc Wilson. Perhaps the doctor knew of a nurse or midwife looking for work. For his children's sake, he had to try. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Ethan had spent another restless night walking the floor with Thomas, who seemed to sleep only in short, fitful bursts. After a quick breakfast, he saddled his horse, leaving the children with Mrs. Peterson one last time. "I'll be back before sundown," he promised, kissing Lily's forehead. "Be good for Mrs. Peterson." The ride into Helena took nearly 2 hours, the town having grown considerably since gold was discovered in Last Chance Gulch. Once a simple mining camp, Helena now boasted proper buildings, businesses, and even a small hospital where Doc Wilson practiced. Ethan tied his horse outside the doctor's office, brushing dust from his clothes before entering. The waiting room was empty except for a young woman sitting primly in a chair, her hands folded in her lap. She looked up as he entered, and Ethan was struck by her striking green eyes set in an open, kind face framed by rich auburn hair tucked neatly beneath a modest bonnet. "Good morning," she greeted him with a slight smile. "Are you here to see Dr. Wilson as well?" "Yes, madam," Ethan replied, removing his hat. "Though I'm not sick. Just looking for some advice." Before she could respond, the door to the examination room opened, and Doc Wilson emerged, adjusting his spectacles. "Ah, Ethan. Good to see you. How's little Thomas doing?" "Not well, Doc. That's why I'm here." Ethan glanced at the young woman, hesitant to discuss his problems in front of a stranger. Doc Wilson followed his gaze. "Oh, where are my manners? Ethan Irwin, this is Miss Violet Owens. She's just arrived from Boston." The woman Miss Owens stood and offered her hand. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Irwin." Ethan took her hand briefly, noting how soft it felt compared to his work-roughened palm. "Likewise, Miss Owens." Miss Owens trained as a nurse at Massachusetts General Hospital, Doc Wilson explained. She's come west hoping to put her skills to good use. In fact, she was just asking if I knew of any positions available. Ethan looked at the doctor sharply, then back at Miss Owens. Could this be the answer to his prayers? She certainly looked capable, and if she had proper training. "Miss Owens," he said carefully, "I don't know if Doc has told you about my situation, but I recently lost my wife. I have a 4-year-old daughter and a 3-month-old son who needs proper care. I've been managing with neighbors' help, but—" He trailed off, finding it difficult to admit his inadequacy. Violet's expression softened with compassion. "I'm very sorry for your loss, Mr. Irwin. I was actually coming to ask Doc if he knew anyone who might be willing to come out to my ranch and help with Thomas. I can offer room and board, plus wages." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "It's not much compared to working in a proper hospital, I suppose." "On the contrary," Violet replied thoughtfully, "caring for a child in need sounds precisely like the sort of position I was hoping to find." She glanced at Doc Wilson. "Would you vouch for Mr. Irwin's character, Doctor?" "Without hesitation," the doctor answered. "Ethan's one of the finest men in the territory, and those children deserve good care." Violet seemed to make up her mind quickly. "Well then, Mr. Irwin, if you're offering the position, I'd like to accept." Ethan blinked in surprise. "Just like that? Don't you want to know more about the ranch? The conditions?" "I can learn about those on the way," she said practically. "The important thing is that there's a baby who needs nursing care. When would you like me to start?" "Today, if possible," Ethan admitted. "I have to return home before nightfall. Then I'll gather my things." She turned to Doc Wilson. "Thank you for your time, Doctor. It seems Providence has answered both our prayers rather quickly." An hour later, Ethan found himself helping Miss Owens onto his wagon, her trunk and 2 modest valises loaded in the back. He'd purchased a few supplies while she collected her belongings from the boarding house where she'd spent just one night. As they left Helena behind, Ethan found himself stealing glances at the woman beside him. She sat straight-backed on the wagon seat, seemingly unbothered by the rough road or the dust that swirled around them. Her profile was delicate but determined, her chin lifted slightly as she took in the vast Montana landscape. "It's quite different from Boston, I imagine," he ventured after they'd traveled in silence for several miles. "Indeed it is," she agreed, "much more open. The sky seems endless here. That's why they call it Big Sky Country." Ethan adjusted his grip on the reins. "If you don't mind my asking, Miss Owens, what brings a Boston-trained nurse all the way to Montana Territory?" Violet was quiet for a moment. "A desire for a fresh start, I suppose, and the knowledge that my skills might be more needed in places like this than in a city with dozens of qualified nurses and doctors." There was something in her tone that suggested there was more to the story, but Ethan didn't press. Everyone who came west had their reasons, and many preferred to leave their pasts behind. "The ranch isn't much," he said instead. 160 acres, about 30 head of cattle. The house is solid, though built it myself after Sarah and I married 5 years ago. You'll have your own room, of course. It used to be a storage space, but I cleared it out after—" He stopped, unwilling to finish the sentence. "After your wife passed," Violet completed gently. "How did she die, if you don't mind my asking? It might help me better understand Thomas's needs." "Childbed fever," Ethan replied, his throat tightening. "Everything seemed fine at first. The birth was difficult, but not unusually so, according to the midwife. But by the next day, Sarah was burning with fever. Doc Wilson came, but he shook his head. She was gone 3 days later. I'm truly sorry, Violet said. Puerperal fever is a terrible thing. Was Thomas affected at all? No, thank God. He's small for his age, though. Doesn't seem to thrive on cow's milk. And Mrs. Peterson said he hardly sleeps. That's not uncommon for infants his age, especially those not nursing from their mothers. There are ways to make cow's milk more digestible for babies. I can show you. For the first time in months, Ethan felt a small flicker of hope. I'd be grateful for any help you can give. They arrived at the ranch as the sun was beginning to lower in the western sky. The modest 2-story house stood in a clearing, with a barn, corral, and bunkhouse nearby. A small garden plot, looking somewhat neglected, sat to one side of the house. It's lovely, Violet commented as Ethan helped her down from the wagon. Very peaceful. Before Ethan could respond, the front door flew open, and Lily came running out, her blonde curls bouncing. "Pa, you're back!" she cried, throwing herself at his legs. She looked curiously at Violet. "Who's that lady?" "This is Miss Owens, Lily Flower. She's a nurse who's come to help us take care of Thomas." Ethan placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Can you say hello?" Lily studied Violet with the frank curiosity of childhood. "Hello, Miss Owens. Are you going to make Thomas stop crying all the time?" Violet knelt to be at eye level with the child. "I'm certainly going to try, Lily. And I hope we can be friends, too." "Do you know how to make pancakes?" Lily asked seriously. "Mama used to make them every Sunday, but Pa burns them." "Lily," Ethan admonished gently, though he couldn't help but smile at his daughter's directness. "As a matter of fact, I do make excellent pancakes," Violet replied, her eyes twinkling. "Perhaps we can have some this Sunday." Lily's face lit up. "Yes, please." She suddenly leaned closer to Violet and sniffed. Then, with wide eyes, she turned to her father. "Pa, she smells like Mama." The child took another delicate sniff near Violet's wrist, like the flowers Mama used to put in water. "Pa, keep her." Ethan felt his face grow hot with embarrassment. "Lily, that's not a polite thing to say. Miss Owens isn't a pet to keep." But Violet only laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "It's quite all right, Mr. Irwin. I take it as a compliment." She addressed Lily again. "I use lavender water, sweetheart. Perhaps your mother did too?" Lily nodded enthusiastically. She had little purple flowers she put in a bag under her pillow, too. "That sounds like lavender as well. It helps people sleep peacefully." Violet stood up. "Should we go inside and meet Thomas now?" Inside, Mrs. Peterson was walking the floor with a fussing Thomas. She looked relieved when they entered. "Thank goodness you're back, Ethan. And you've found help, I see." After introductions were made, Mrs. Peterson gratefully handed the baby to Violet, who cradled him with practiced ease. Almost immediately, Thomas's cries subsided to whimpers as he gazed up at the new face. "Well, I'll be," Mrs. Peterson marveled. "He's taken to you already, Miss Owens." Violet smiled down at the infant. "He's just curious about the new person holding him, but he is quite hungry, I think, and probably uncomfortable." She looked up at Ethan. "Mr. Irwin, could you show me the kitchen? I'd like to prepare a better formula for him right away." After Mrs. Peterson departed for her own home, Ethan showed Violet around the modest house. The main floor consisted of a sitting room, kitchen, and his bedroom, while upstairs were 2 small rooms, Lily's, and what would now be Violet's. Thomas's cradle was currently in Ethan's room, though Violet suggested it might be best to move it to her room temporarily so she could tend to him during the night. "You look exhausted, Mr. Irwin," she observed, as she efficiently prepared a new mixture for Thomas, adding a small amount of sugar and lime water to the cow's milk. "When did you last have a full night's sleep?" Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "About 3 months ago, I reckon." "Then tonight, you will sleep. I'll take care of Thomas." Her tone brooked no argument. "This little one and I will get acquainted, and you need your strength." There was something so capable, so reassuring about Miss Violet Owens that Ethan found himself nodding in agreement. After a simple supper, during which Violet somehow managed to both eat and feed Thomas his new formula, Ethan showed her to her room. "It's not much," he apologized, looking at the sparse furnishings, a narrow bed, a small bureau, and a washstand. "It's perfect," she assured him. "I've spent the last 3 years in a nurse's dormitory with 4 other women. This feels quite luxurious by comparison." Later that night, as Ethan lay in his own bed for the first time in what felt like forever, he realized he couldn't hear Thomas crying. The house was peaceful, quiet except for the familiar creaking of the timbers and the distant hooting of an owl. He sent up a silent prayer of thanks before drifting into the deepest sleep he'd had since Sarah died. In the coming days, Violet established a routine that brought a sense of order back to the Irwin household. Thomas began to thrive on her modified formula, gaining weight and crying less. She kept the house tidy, prepared simple but nourishing meals, and spent time teaching Lily her letters and numbers. Ethan found himself watching her when she wasn't looking, the gentle way she handled Thomas, her patience with Lily's endless questions, the quiet competence with which she managed the household. Sometimes when she sat in the rocking chair by the fire, humming softly to Thomas, the ache in his chest that had been constant since Sarah's death seemed to ease just a little. A week turned into 2, and then a month. Spring was giving way to summer, and the ranch demanded more of Ethan's time. With Violet caring for the children and home, he could focus on the cattle and crops, coming in each evening to a warm meal and clean house. It was almost like having a family again, though he reminded himself sternly that Miss Owens was an employee, not his wife. One evening in late June, after the children were asleep, Ethan found Violet sitting on the porch, watching the fireflies dance in the gathering darkness. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, hovering in the doorway. "Please do," she replied, gesturing to the empty chair beside her. Ethan sat, stretching his long legs out in front of him. "Thomas went down easy tonight. He's sleeping much better now, almost 6 hours at a stretch." Violet smiled. "He's a strong little boy. Thanks to you." Ethan turned to look at her profile in the fading light. "I don't know how to thank you properly for all you've done, Miss Owens. You've brought life back to this house." "Please, call me Violet," she said. "And there's no need for thanks. I'm simply doing my job." "It's more than that." Ethan struggled to find the right words. "You've given us back our dignity, our hope. Before you came, I was drowning." Violet was quiet for a moment. "I understand loss, Mr. Irwin. My father died when I was 16, and my mother followed 2 years later. That's when I decided to become a nurse to help others the way I couldn't help them." "Please, call me Ethan," he said, returning her earlier gesture. "And I'm sorry about your parents. Life is full of sorrows, but also joys." She looked over at him. "Your children are a joy, Ethan. Lily is so bright and curious, and Thomas has such a sweet disposition when he's not hungry or tired." "They're the only thing that kept me going after Sarah died," Ethan admitted. "There were days I didn't think I could face another sunrise, but then Lily would need breakfast, or Thomas would need changing, and I had to keep moving forward." "That's how grief works," Violet said softly. "One foot in front of the other, one day at a time, until eventually you realize you're still living." Something in her understanding gave Ethan the courage to ask the question that had been on his mind. "Violet, why did you really come west? It seems a waste of your talents to be looking after one baby when you could be working in a proper hospital." She didn't answer immediately, her gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "I told you I wanted a fresh start, which is true. What I didn't say was why." She took a deep breath. I was engaged to be married in Boston. My fiancé was a doctor at the hospital where I trained. I thought we were happy, but then I discovered he had been. She paused, searching for appropriate words. He had been unfaithful with multiple women, including another nurse. I'm sorry, Ethan said genuinely. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal, Violet continued. It was that everyone knew my colleagues, my friends, and no one told me. They pitied me behind my back while smiling to my face. She shook her head. Once I found out, I couldn't stay. Every corner of that hospital held a memory, and every sympathetic glance felt like sandpaper on raw skin. So you came as far west as you could. Precisely. I needed space to heal, to remember who I was apart from him, and I thought perhaps I could do some good along the way. Ethan nodded. Well, you've certainly done good here. They sat in companionable silence as darkness fell completely, the stars emerging in brilliant clusters above them. It felt comfortable, this quiet moment shared between two people who understood loss and the slow, painful process of healing. Before they retired for the night, Ethan found himself saying, I'm glad you're here, Violet. Not just for the children, but I'm just glad. She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. So am I, Ethan. So am I. As summer progressed, life on the Irwin Ranch settled into a pleasant rhythm. Ethan spent his days working the land and tending the cattle, occasionally hiring extra hands for the bigger jobs. Violet cared for the children, kept the house, and had even revived Sarah's garden, coaxing vegetables and herbs from the once neglected soil. Thomas was growing stronger every day, his cheeks filling out, and his blue eyes so like his father's becoming more alert and curious. He had begun to babble and reach for objects, developments that Violet noted with professional satisfaction and personal delight. Lily had attached herself to Violet like a shadow, helping with simple chores and begging for stories at bedtime. She still occasionally mentioned her mother, but the raw grief that had shadowed her young face was gradually being replaced by childish joy again. And Ethan. Ethan found himself thinking of Violet in ways that both surprised and unsettled him. It wasn't just gratitude he felt when he watched her rock Thomas to sleep or patiently teach Lily how to set the table properly. There was something more, something that made his heart beat faster when their hands accidentally touched or when she looked up and caught him watching her. One scorching July afternoon, Ethan returned to the house earlier than usual, having finished repairing a section of fence. He heard laughter coming from behind the house and followed the sound to find Violet and Lily in the yard. They had dragged a large metal tub into the shade of an old oak tree and filled it with water. Lily, stripped down to her underclothes, was splashing happily while Violet, her sleeves rolled up and her hair coming loose from its usual neat arrangement, laughed and splashed back. Thomas lay on a blanket nearby, cooing at a wooden rattle Ethan had carved for him. The domestic scene struck Ethan with such force that he had to pause, one hand against the corner of the house to steady himself. This was what he had lost when Sarah died, not just his wife, but the heart of his family, the laughter and simple joys of everyday life. Lily spotted him first. Pa, come play in the water with us. It's so hot, and Miss Violet made a swimming pond. Violet looked up, pushing a strand of hair from her flushed face. Oh, I hope you don't mind, Ethan. It's been so terribly hot. And Lily mentioned she'd never been swimming. I don't mind at all, he said, approaching them. It looks like fun. It is fun, Lily declared, standing up to her waist in the water. Miss Violet says ladies in Boston take baths all the time, not just on Saturdays. Ethan chuckled. Is that so? Indeed, Violet replied with mock seriousness. Sometimes even twice in 1 week. Scandalous, Ethan teased, and was rewarded with Violet's laugh, a sound he found himself trying to elicit more and more often. Pa, you're all sweaty, Lily observed. You should get in the water, too. Ethan glanced at Violet, who blushed slightly but nodded. I'll take Thomas inside for his feeding while you cool off. Come along, little man. She scooped up the baby and headed toward the house, her damp skirt clinging to her legs as she walked. Ethan watched her go, then turned to his daughter. All right, Lilyflower, make room for your old pa. After cooling off in the improvised bath, Ethan changed into clean clothes and joined Violet in the kitchen, where she was preparing supper while Thomas dozed in a basket nearby. Thank you for that, he said, leaning against the doorframe. It's been too long since I heard Lily laugh like that. Children are remarkably resilient, Violet replied, kneading dough for biscuits. They need routine and security, but they also need joy. Lily is healing, just as you are. And what about you? Ethan asked before he could stop himself. Are you healing too? Violet's hand stilled for a moment. Yes, she said softly. I believe I am. She looked up at him, flour dusting her cheeks. This place has been good for me, Ethan. You and the children. You've reminded me of what's real and important. Something passed between them then, a current of understanding and possibility. Ethan found himself moving closer, drawn by a force he couldn't name. Violet didn't step away, her eyes meeting his steadily. The moment was broken by Thomas's sudden cry, making them both jump. Violet wiped her hands on her apron and moved to pick up the baby. He's probably hungry again, she said, her voice slightly breathless. Would you mind watching the stove for a moment? Of course, Ethan replied, trying to calm his racing heart. What had he been about to do? Kiss her? The thought both thrilled and terrified him. It had been only 4 months since Sarah's death. Was it disloyal to feel this way about another woman so soon? Yet as he watched Violet soothe Thomas with such natural affection, Ethan couldn't deny the truth any longer. He was falling in love with Violet Owens. The revelation haunted him through supper and into the evening. He was quieter than usual as they ate, responding to Lily's chatter with distracted nods and half-answers. Violet gave him curious glances but didn't press, for which he was grateful. After putting the children to bed, they found themselves once again on the porch, watching as a summer storm built on the horizon, lightning flashing in the distant clouds. Penny for your thoughts, Violet said eventually, breaking the silence between them. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. They're not worth that much, I'm afraid. I doubt that. She turned in her chair to face him. Something's troubling you, Ethan. Has been since this afternoon. He couldn't meet her eyes. I'm just confused, I suppose. About what? Ethan struggled to find the right words. About what I'm feeling. About whether it's appropriate. Violet was quiet for a long moment. Is it about Sarah? Partly. Ethan finally looked at her. And partly about you. I see. Her voice was careful, neutral. Do you? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Because I'm not sure I do. Sarah's only been gone 4 months, but today, watching you with the children, I felt something I didn't think I could feel again. And it terrifies me, Violet. Not just because of what Sarah would think, but because I hired you to care for my children, not to... He trailed off, unable to complete the thought. Not to care for you as well? Violet suggested gently. Ethan nodded, grateful for her understanding. It wouldn't be right to expect that. Ethan. Violet's voice was soft but firm. You haven't expected anything. You've been a perfect gentleman. And feelings. Feelings simply happen. We can't control them, only how we act on them. And how should I act on them? He asked, almost desperately. Tell me, because I don't know anymore. With honesty and patience, she replied. The truth is, I've developed feelings for you too, Ethan. Feelings that go beyond my role here. but we both carry wounds that aren't fully healed. Perhaps we should give ourselves time before we decide what these feelings mean." Her candor both surprised and relieved him. "You're wiser than I am, Violet Owens." "Not wiser," she corrected with a small smile. "Just experienced in matters of the heart, both the joys and the sorrows." Lightning flashed closer now, followed by a low rumble of thunder. The air had grown heavy with the approaching storm, the wind picking up and rustling the leaves of the nearby trees. "We should go in before we get soaked," Violet said, rising from her chair. Ethan stood too, catching her hand before she could move toward the door. "Violet." Her name was like a prayer on his lips. "Thank you. For understanding. For everything." "You're welcome, Ethan." She squeezed his hand briefly before releasing it. "We'll figure this out together. Whatever this may be." As they went inside, the first fat raindrops began to fall, pattering on the roof above them. That night, Ethan lay awake listening to the storm, thinking about Violet's words. Patience and honesty, he could manage those. And perhaps, with time, the guilt that still clung to him would fade, allowing him to embrace the second chance that seemed to be unfolding before him. August brought with it the hottest days of the year and an unexpected visitor to the Irwin ranch. Ethan was mending a harness on the porch when he spotted a buggy approaching, dust billowing behind it on the dry road. As it drew closer, he recognized Doc Wilson at the reins. "Morning, Doc," he called as the older man pulled the buggy to a stop. "What brings you all the way out here? Everyone's healthy as horses." "That's good to hear," Doc Wilson replied, climbing down. "Actually, I came to see Miss Owens. Got a proposition for her." Ethan felt a sudden knot in his stomach. "She's inside with the children. Come on in." Violet looked up in surprise when they entered the sitting room, where she was showing Lily how to stitch a simple pattern on a piece of cloth. Thomas sat on a blanket nearby, contentedly gumming a wooden spoon. "Dr. Wilson, what a pleasant surprise." She set aside her sewing and stood to greet him. "Miss Owens," the doctor nodded. "You're looking well. Life in the country agrees with you. It seems." "It does indeed," she smiled. "What brings you out our way?" "Business, I'm afraid." Doc Wilson removed his hat. "The town council's approved funds for a proper clinic in Helena, and I'm looking for a qualified nurse to help run it. Naturally, I thought of you." Ethan felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath his feet. Of course, Doc would offer Violet a position she was trained for far more than caring for one baby. He looked at her, trying to gauge her reaction. Violet's expression revealed nothing. "That's very kind of you to think of me, Doctor. What exactly would this position entail?" As Doc Wilson explained the details: a proper salary, living quarters attached to the clinic, regular hours with occasional emergency calls, Ethan struggled to keep his face neutral. This was a far better opportunity than what he could offer her. A chance to use all her training to help dozens of people instead of just his small family. How could she possibly refuse? "It's an impressive proposal," Violet said when the doctor finished. "Would you mind if I took some time to consider it?" "Of course, my dear. No need to decide this minute. I'll be heading back to town tomorrow afternoon if you'd like to ride along." "Thank you. I'll let you know my decision by then." After Doc Wilson departed, having stayed for lunch and a visit with the children, an uncomfortable silence fell between Ethan and Violet. Lily, sensing the tension, became unusually quiet, while Thomas fussed more than usual. That evening, after the children were asleep, Ethan found Violet in the garden, harvesting some late vegetables by the light of a lantern. He watched her for a moment, the graceful way she moved, the care she took with each plant. The thought of not seeing her every day made his chest ache. "You should take Doc's offer," he said finally, making her look up in surprise. "It's a better opportunity than being stuck out here with us." Violet straightened, brushing dirt from her hands. Is that what you think? That I'm stuck here? Aren't you? You're a trained nurse, Violet. You could be doing important work in town, helping lots of people. Not just, he gestured vaguely, not just playing nursemaid to one baby and housekeeper to a widower. Is that all you think I do here? Her voice was quiet but had an edge to it. Just playing at being useful? Ethan immediately regretted his choice of words. No, that's not what I meant. This job with Doc Wilson is what you came west for, isn't it? A chance to use your skills, to build a new life. Perhaps. Violet set down her basket and lantern. Or perhaps what I've found here is exactly what I needed, even if I didn't realize it when I came west. What do you mean? She took a step toward him. I mean that in Boston, I was just one nurse among many. Important work? Yes, but impersonal. Here, I've come to care deeply about Thomas and Lily. She paused, her eyes meeting his in the lantern light. And about you, Ethan. His heart hammered in his chest. Violet. Let me finish. She took another step closer. These past 3 months have been healing for me. Being part of this household, watching Thomas grow stronger, seeing Lily smile again, observing you rebuild your life day by day, it's given me purpose and joy in a way hospital work never did. But it's not enough, Ethan protested weakly. You deserve more than what I can offer. Shouldn't I be the judge of what's enough for me? Violet asked gently. What I deserve? Ethan had no answer for that. Instead, he asked the question that had been tormenting him since Doc Wilson's arrival. Are you going to take the job? I don't know yet, she admitted. Part of me is tempted by the professional opportunity, but another part... She looked up at the star-filled sky. Another part wonders if there might be reasons to stay. Like what? Ethan held his breath, afraid to hope. Violet met his gaze steadily. Like the possibility that what's growing between us might be worth exploring. That the family we've begun to build here, unorthodox as it may be, deserves a chance. I have no right to ask you to stay, Ethan said hoarsely. No right to stand in the way of your future. You're not asking, Ethan, and you're not standing in my way. She reached out and took his hand. You're part of the future I'm considering. The touch of her hand in his broke something loose in Ethan's chest. Before he could think better of it, he pulled her gently toward him and lowered his head to hers. The kiss was tentative at first, a question rather than a demand. When Violet responded, rising on her toes to deepen the contact, Ethan felt a surge of joy so intense it was almost painful. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he whispered. Not as Thomas's nurse or Lily's teacher, but as whatever we might become to each other, given time. Violet's hands came up to frame his face. Are you sure, Ethan? It's only been 4 months since Sarah would want me to be happy, he said, the words feeling right as he spoke them. She'd want the children to be happy. And you make us happy, Violet. You've brought life back to this house, to all of us. She smiled, her eyes shining in the lantern light. Then my answer to Dr. Wilson will be no. My place is here, for as long as you and the children want me. That might be a very long time, Ethan warned, a smile tugging at his lips. I'm counting on it, Violet replied, and pulled him down for another kiss. The next day, Violet declined Doc Wilson's offer as politely as possible, explaining that she had found her place at the Irwin Ranch. The doctor seemed disappointed but not entirely surprised. I had a feeling you might say that, he admitted with a knowing smile. The way Ethan looks at you, well, I suspected there might be more keeping you here than just professional dedication. Violet blushed. We're taking things slowly, Doctor. There's been a lot of loss for this family, and wounds take time to heal. Wise approach, he nodded. But don't wait too long. My dear, life is shorter than we like to think, especially out here in the territories. After Doc Wilson's departure, Ethan and Violet agreed to be discreet about the change in their relationship, at least until they were both more certain of where it was leading. But they needn't have worried about keeping it from Lily, who had an uncanny perception for matters of the heart. "Are you going to be our new mama?" she asked Violet directly one evening as Violet was tucking her into bed. Startled, Violet sat on the edge of the bed. "What makes you ask that, sweetheart?" "Because Pa smiles now when he looks at you, like he used to smile at Mama. And because you kiss sometimes when you think I'm not looking." Violet felt her cheeks grow warm. "You've seen us kissing?" Lily nodded solemnly. "Yesterday by the barn, and the day before on the porch." "Well," Violet said carefully, "your father and I do care for each other very much, but becoming someone's mother is a very important thing, not a decision to be made quickly." "But you already take care of us like a mama," Lily persisted. "You make the food and wash our clothes and kiss our hurts when we fall down." "That's true," Violet acknowledged. "And I love doing those things for you and Thomas." "Then why can't you just be our mama for real?" Lily's lower lip trembled slightly. "Don't you want to stay with us forever?" Violet gathered the child into her arms. "Oh, Lily, of course I want to stay. It's just that your father and I need time to make sure that's the right decision for everyone." "I think it's right," Lily mumbled against Violet's shoulder. "Thomas thinks so too. He doesn't cry hardly at all anymore since you came." "Well, that's a very strong recommendation," Violet said, smiling against Lily's hair. "I promise we'll figure it out soon, all right?" Lily nodded, seemingly satisfied for the moment. After she fell asleep, Violet went downstairs to find Ethan by the fire, whittling a small wooden horse. "We've been found out," she announced, settling into the chair opposite his. "Your daughter has apparently been spying on our private moments." Ethan looked up, alarmed. "What?" Violet explained Lily's observations and questions, watching as Ethan's expression shifted from concern to rueful amusement. "That child doesn't miss a thing," he said, shaking his head. "Sarah always said she had eyes in the back of her head." "She's asked if I'm going to be their new mother," Violet said softly. Ethan set down his whittling. "And what did you tell her?" "That it's a very important decision that takes time." Violet met his gaze steadily. "Was that the right answer?" "It was honest," Ethan replied. "And we agreed on honesty, didn't we?" "We did." Violet hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind since her conversation with Lily. "Ethan, where do you see this us going? I know we said we'd take it slowly, but perhaps we should talk about our expectations." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, the firelight playing across his features. "I think you know where I hope this leads," he said finally. "I'm not good with fancy words, Violet, but these past few months have shown me that life can have second chances, that happiness can come again, even after terrible loss." "Are you saying—" Violet hardly dared to breathe. "I'm saying that I'm falling in love with you," Ethan said simply. "Maybe I already have. And if you feel the same, then yes. I hope one day you'll be my wife and a mother to my children, not to replace Sarah, but to create something new and good with us." Tears welled in Violet's eyes. "I do feel the same, Ethan. I've tried to be professional, to remember why I came here in the first place, but somewhere along the way, this place became home, and you and the children became everything." Ethan moved from his chair to kneel before her, taking her hands in his. "I'm not asking for an answer now. You're right that these decisions take time, but I wanted you to know where my heart stands." Violet leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, a gentle confirmation of the feelings growing between them. "Thank you for telling me, and for giving me time." As summer gave way to fall, Ethan and Violet's relationship deepened. They still maintained separate bedrooms and a certain propriety around the children and neighbors, but their growing affection was obvious to anyone who saw them together. Thomas continued to thrive, sitting up on his own now and babbling constantly. His first clear word was Vi, which he called out whenever Violet entered the room, reaching for her with pudgy arms. Lily, too, blossomed under Violet's care, learning to read simple words and helping more around the house. She had taken to calling Violet Mama Vi when she thought Ethan wasn't listening, a development that filled him with both tender pain and hope. In late September, when the aspen trees had turned golden on the mountainsides, Ethan rode into Helena for supplies and returned with a small package wrapped in brown paper. He presented it to Violet that evening after the children were asleep. "What's this?" she asked, surprised. "Open it and see," he replied, an unusual nervousness in his voice. Inside the package was a small leather-bound book of poetry by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Violet ran her fingers over the embossed cover. "Ethan, it's beautiful. Thank you." "Open it," he urged gently. "There's something marked inside." Violet noticed a thin ribbon bookmark and opened to that page. The poem was, "How Do I Love Thee?" And at the bottom of the page, Ethan had written in his careful hand, "Violet, will you marry me?" Ethan. She looked up, her heart pounding. Ethan. He knelt before her, just as he had that night by the fire weeks earlier. "I know we said we'd take time, and if you need more, I understand. But I love you, Violet Owens. I want to build a life with you, raise these children with you, grow old with you." He took her hands in his. "Will you be my wife?" Tears spilled down Violet's cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you, Ethan Irwin." The joy that bloomed on his face was like sunrise after the longest night. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left them both breathless. When they finally broke apart, Violet rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "When?" she asked softly. "Whenever you like," Ethan replied, stroking her hair. "Though before winter sets in might be practical. The passes can get snowed in, and I'd like Doc Wilson to be able to attend." Violet nodded against his chest. "October, then? That gives us a few weeks to prepare." "October it is." Ethan lifted her chin to look into her eyes. "Are you sure, Violet? This life isn't easy, and being a ready-made mother to 2 children." "I've never been more sure of anything," she interrupted. "I love you, Ethan, and I love Thomas and Lily as if they were my own. This is the family I choose, the life I want." Their wedding took place on a crisp October afternoon, with the mountains ablaze in autumn colors. It was a simple ceremony at the small church in Helena, attended by a few neighbors, Doc Wilson, and of course, the children. Lily, dressed in her best dress with a crown of fall flowers in her hair, stood proudly beside Violet, while Thomas, now nearly 8 months old, was held by Mrs. Peterson, babbling happily throughout the service. Violet wore a simple blue dress that Ethan had never seen before, ordered secretly from a catalog and altered to fit her perfectly. Her auburn hair was loosely pinned up with white rosebuds tucked into the curls, and her cheeks were flushed with happiness as she spoke her vows in a clear, steady voice. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan kissed her with such tenderness that several of the women present dabbed at their eyes. Lily clapped her hands in delight, and even Thomas seemed to understand the significance of the moment, reaching out his arms toward the newly married couple. After a small reception at the hotel, they returned to the ranch, their home as a family legally bound at last. That night, after the children were asleep, Ethan carried Violet across the threshold of his now their bedroom, both of them laughing at the traditional gesture. "Welcome home, Mrs. Irwin," he murmured against her lips. "I've been home for months," Violet replied softly. I just didn't realize it until now. As winter settled over the Montana Territory, bringing snow and long, cozy evenings by the fire, Ethan often found himself watching his new family with a sense of wonder. Thomas had begun pulling himself up on furniture, determined to walk soon. Lily had taken to her role as big sister with renewed enthusiasm, now that Violet was officially her new mother, and Violet herself seemed to bloom in her role as wife and mother, bringing warmth and joy to every corner of their home. On Christmas Eve, as they sat before the fire after putting the children to bed with promises that Santa would come in the night, Violet took Ethan's hand and placed it gently on her stomach. "I have an early Christmas gift for you," she said softly, "one that won't arrive until summer." It took a moment for her meaning to register. When it did, Ethan's eyes widened. "Violet, are you saying?" She nodded, her eyes shining. "We're going to have a baby, Ethan. Our baby." Ethan gathered her into his arms, his heart so full he thought it might burst. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "Our child." "Are you happy?" Violet asked, looking up at him. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," Ethan replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm overwhelmed, grateful, terrified, joyful." He kissed her gently. "How are you feeling? Are you well?" "I'm perfectly fine," she assured him. "A little tired, a little queasy in the mornings, but that's to be expected. And before you worry yourself sick, this pregnancy is nothing like Sarah's. I'm healthy, and we'll take every precaution." Ethan nodded, the shadow of his first wife's death briefly darkening his joy. "I couldn't bear to lose you, Violet." "You won't," she said firmly. "I've assisted with enough births to know what to watch for, and Doc Wilson is only a few hours away. We'll be fine, all of us." As the winter deepened, so did their happiness. Violet's pregnancy progressed smoothly, her body changing subtly at first, then more obviously as spring approached. Ethan found himself watching her with a mixture of awe and protectiveness, insisting she rest more, and trying to take on extra household tasks, despite her protestations that she was perfectly capable. Lily was thrilled at the news that she would have another sibling, asking endless questions about the baby and where it came from, questions that sometimes left Ethan red-faced and Violet struggling not to laugh as they provided age-appropriate answers. Thomas, now walking unsteadily and beginning to form simple words, seemed to sense the coming change as well, often patting Violet's growing belly and saying "baby" with solemn concentration. By June 1876, Violet's time was drawing near. The garden was in full bloom, the cattle were fat on summer grass, and the house that had once seemed so empty to Ethan now overflowed with life and love. One warm evening, as they sat on the porch watching Thomas chase fireflies under Lily's supervision, Violet suddenly took a sharp breath, her hand going to her side. "What is it?" Ethan asked immediately, alert to any sign of discomfort. "Just a strong kick," Violet reassured him, taking his hand and placing it where he could feel the baby's movements. "He or she is getting impatient, I think." Ethan marveled at the firm push against his palm. Strong, like their mother. Violet smiled. And stubborn, like their father. 3 days later, in the quiet hours before dawn, Violet woke Ethan with a gentle touch on his shoulder. "It's time," she said calmly. "The pains have been coming regularly for about an hour." Ethan was instantly awake, heart racing. "I'll get Mrs. Peterson to stay with the children, then ride for Doc Wilson." "There's no rush," Violet said, breathing carefully through a contraction. "First babies usually take their time, but yes, having the doctor here would be reassuring." By the time Ethan returned with Doc Wilson, the sun was high in the sky, and Violet's labor had intensified. Mrs. Barkin. Peterson had the children occupied in the garden, keeping them far enough from the house that they couldn't hear their mother's occasional cries of pain. The hours stretched on, Ethan pacing outside the bedroom door when Violet insisted he was making her nervous, hovering at her bedside. Doc Wilson came out periodically to reassure him that everything was progressing normally, but Ethan couldn't help remembering Sarah's labor, how it too had seemed normal at first. Finally, as the sun was beginning to set, a different cry pierced the air, the indignant wail of a newborn taking its first breath. Ethan burst through the door to find Doc Wilson wrapping a tiny, red-faced infant in a clean blanket while Violet lay back against the pillows, exhausted but radiant. "Congratulations, Pa," Doc Wilson said with a broad smile. "You have a healthy daughter." Ethan moved to Violet's side, taking her hand and pressing it to his lips. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm wonderful," she assured him, though her face was pale with exhaustion. "Have you seen her? Isn't she perfect?" Doc Wilson placed the swaddled infant in Violet's arms, and Ethan got his first clear look at his new daughter. She had a dusting of dark hair, unlike Thomas and Lily's fair coloring, and when she blinked up at them, her eyes were a deep blue-green. "She's beautiful," Ethan whispered, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. 5 perfect fingers curled reflexively around his one, and he felt his heart expand with a love so intense it was almost painful. "What shall we call her?" Violet looked down at their daughter. "I was thinking, what about Sarah? To honor her memory, and because without her, none of us would be here together." Tears filled Ethan's eyes at the generosity of his wife's heart. "Sarah," he repeated softly. "Sarah Hope Irwin." "Hope?" Violet asked. "Because that's what you've given all of us," Ethan explained, his voice thick. "A new hope, a new beginning." Later that evening, after Doc Wilson had examined both mother and baby one last time and pronounced them perfectly healthy, Ethan brought Lily and Thomas in to meet their new sister. Lily approached the bed cautiously, her eyes wide with wonder. "She's so tiny," she whispered, peering at the sleeping infant in Violet's arms. "Was I that small?" "Even smaller," Ethan told her, lifting her up to sit beside Violet on the bed. "You were born a little early." Thomas, now a sturdy toddler of 15 months, was more interested in climbing onto the bed to be near Violet than in the new baby. "Mama Vi," he said, patting her arm possessively. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm still your Mama Vi," Violet assured him, shifting Sarah to make room for him at her side. "And this is your new sister, Sarah. Can you say Sarah?" "Sawa," Thomas repeated dutifully, then promptly lost interest, more concerned with examining the buttons on Violet's nightgown. Lily, however, was transfixed. "Can I touch her?" she asked. "Very gently," Violet nodded. Lily reached out one small finger to stroke the baby's cheek. "She's so soft," she marveled. Then, looking up at Violet with serious eyes, she asked, "Does this mean you'll stay forever and ever now? Since you're really our mama?" Violet exchanged a glance with Ethan, her eyes filling with tears. "Oh, Lily, I was always going to stay forever. Even before Sarah was born, even before your father and I were married. From the very first day when you said I smelled like your mama and told your pa to keep me, that's when I started to fall in love with this family." "I remember," Lily said proudly, "and Pa kept you, just like I said he should." Ethan laughed, gathering his older children close while gazing down at his wife and newborn daughter. "I sure did, Lily Flower. Best decision I ever made." As twilight deepened into night, Ethan settled the older children in their beds with promises that they could hold baby Sarah properly tomorrow. Returning to the bedroom he shared with Violet, he found her nursing the infant, a look of peaceful contentment on her face. "They're asleep?" she asked softly. "Hmm. Though I think Lily would have stayed up all night watching Sarah if I'd let her." Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, his heart full as he took in the sight of his wife and newest child. How are you feeling? Tired but happy, Violet replied. So very happy, Ethan. He leaned forward to kiss her forehead. You've given me more than I ever thought possible, Violet. A second chance at love, a mother for my children, and now this precious gift. He touched Sarah's downy head gently. Sometimes I wonder what I did to deserve so much happiness after such grief. Perhaps it's not about deserving, Violet suggested. Perhaps it's simply about accepting the gifts life offers, even when they come in unexpected ways. Ethan nodded, thinking of the strange, winding path that had brought them together. A desperate widower, a nurse seeking escape from heartbreak, two children in need of a mother's love, and a simple, innocent observation from a 4-year-old. She smells like Mama, Pa. Keep her. Thank God I listened to Lily, he said, smiling at the memory. Indeed. That child has remarkably good instincts. Violet adjusted Sarah, who had fallen asleep at her breast. Would you like to hold her while I rest a bit? Ethan carefully took his sleeping daughter, cradling her tiny form against his chest. As Violet settled back against the pillows, her eyes drifting closed, he moved to the window, showing his newest child, the Montana night. Welcome to the world, Sarah Hope, he whispered. You've come to a house full of love, thanks to the remarkable woman who gave you life. Your Mama Violet, who smells like lavender and kindness, and who healed us all with her gentle heart. Outside, the stars shone down on the peaceful ranch, where not so long ago grief had seemed an insurmountable mountain. Now, as Ethan gazed down at his daughter's sleeping face, he felt only gratitude for the journey that had brought them here to this moment of perfect contentment, to this family forged through loss and found again in love. As the seasons turned and years passed, the Irwin Ranch prospered under Ethan and Violet's care. Thomas grew into a sturdy, quiet boy with his father's steady nature and love for the land. Lily became a thoughtful young lady with her mother Sarah's blonde curls and her mother Violet's compassionate heart. And little Sarah Hope, with her dark hair and curious spirit, brought daily joy to the family that had welcomed her as a symbol of their new beginning. 2 more children joined the family in time, twin boys, Robert and James, born on a snowy December night in 1878. The house that had once echoed with lonely silence now rang with laughter, occasional squabbles, and the countless small sounds of a family living fully and loving deeply. Violet never regretted declining Doc Wilson's offer all those years ago. Though she occasionally assisted the doctor with difficult cases in the area, her primary work remained caring for her family and the neighboring homesteaders who came to rely on her medical knowledge and gentle touch. And Ethan, watching his wife move through their home with quiet confidence, surrounded by the children they were raising together, thanked God daily for the second chance at happiness he'd been given. Sometimes, in quiet moments, he would catch the scent of lavender as Violet passed and remember Lily's innocent observation on that fateful day. She smells like Mama, Pa. Keep her. He had kept her, this remarkable woman who had healed their broken family with her love. And in doing so, he had found not just a nurse for his baby, but a partner for his life, a mother for his children, and a love that would sustain them through all the joys and sorrows the years would bring. In the wild Montana wilderness, where life was often harsh and unforgiving, the Irwin family had created something beautiful and enduring, a home where love conquered grief, where second chances bloomed into lasting happiness, and where the simple scent of lavender would forever be the fragrance of hope reborn.